methane round and round and round, which is your, shall we say, price law for circulation of the economy. And that is the reason why we are promoting, or my colleagues and I promote methane as opposed to, say, biodiesel, because we see this being part of an overall cycle, again, thinking through chemically, formulaically, the paradigms of Joseph Beuys. Now, art does not exist in a vacuum. Whatever Beuys performed and worked out in, first of all, in the 60s, but then in 1977, was also done by a scientist in the same year, 1977, about this issue of the circulation of CO2, CH4, and O2 by archaebacteria, bacteria, and then animals, plants. That is to say, science was discovering aspects of nature at the same time that art was making a paradigm. And I think we can assume that art thinking is often parallel with scientific thinking. Okay, now, in response to global warming, or I should say in response to oil companies, Shell, BP, Exxon, Total, there would be then freshwater technologies and saltwater technologies. Freshwater being water wheels, that's pretty understood, it's a better way to do it than dams. Or Fred, the waterwheels concept of harvesting from the canals. And then also saltwater be, say, large algae or giant algae and these kind of rigs. And these technologies are all, they exist, there's nothing complicated, it's just a matter of making them become available. Odor, of course, you know, it's German, but I'm just saying, either you have global warming oil companies, or you have these quite primitive technologies applied basin by basin, region by region, for example, right here around Hoofddorp. And the reason being that the oil companies have a fairly simple formula for organization. This is a peace sign. This is how Western, except for Russia, oil companies are organized, and they've been done this way since 1946. You have the US companies, which have about, I believe it's 4/7 of the quantity. That's Exxon, BP, Exxon, Chevron, Texaco. Then you have the UK companies, and of course, Holland, somehow, Shell and BP. You have Total, France. And then the three other losers of World War II at that time, not Germany, but Italy, Japan, and Spain being kind of involved, get pieces of this pie. And that is your oil pie. And they are the ones who decide, they're the ones who have the money. And as I say, in New Zealand, they might not even exist anymore. We're on that edge. But that's what you're up against in this whole context of the Copenhagen. You see that Shell is advertising there in the new energy future, BP is advertising, and so on. The problem there is that all of their ideas, for example, about algae to fuel, are done in ponds, they're done monoculturally, they're done with genetic engineering, not ecosystematic, very unstable in terms of biology, very questionable, and they can't get the quantities. But we can demonstrate quantities with ecosystems within the Duchamp paradigm of the basin, of that kind of paradigm. Now I'm going to get on, and of course you understand, the ecosystem is the, shall we say, fertility unit. And again, in the mountains, you want to begin to break down dams and break down the way we have straightaways and have meander systems, and this is just all earth art vocabulary, you know. Earth art vocabulary in the estuaries, and again, that's really the offshore rig. Now I'm going to run through this fairly quickly because I think I've said it all. And if you want, and here's my point now. What I've shown there is being tested in Wellington Harbour in New Zealand. It's through basically a new education system that has about 250,000 students, 700 schools, so it's all kind of heavy. And it's really just about a submersible structure that would rise and fall with the water that allows you to avoid storms. The previous scientific work, like this, started in the late 60s in the US, really coming to a head in the 70s and in the 80s, had no storm provision. So they began to fall apart, and they couldn't figure it out. The point I'm making here is that scientists of all kinds of caliber in all kinds of countries have worked on these ideas for many decades, and we're only now beginning to see maybe we can make it happen because we can get around that peace sign, around that oil company setup into something done on a local basis, frame by frame. Now there's, again, the rig that we're trying to promote, and there's the kind of areas where it can be done, say, mainly in the southern hemisphere. The southern hemisphere has much more ocean possibility. I had a residency in Plymouth, and the scientists there said, why are you wasting your time in England? You should be in the southern hemisphere, Chile, that kind of thing. And we have quite a bit of presence right now in Chile, 3 times visits, meetings with the top political party there, etc. Okay, the other rig system being tested would be done with a company actually in Zeeland, and then also, as I said, on the English coast, and that's for the algae that are available, again, in the wild around here. This is known, again, this is being done in the Venice Lagoon. These are not that strange, we're just talking about promoting them. This is your waterwheels sketch, very conceptualized, conceptually presented. But think about what would happen if we took all the stuff out of the water, as is being intended here, but had more of a system, okay? Maybe doing this by hand or without having lots of machines, and then we actually put it into a dumpster and then made it into methane gas, which is what is very feasible to do. We have already now tanks that do that at the moment. For example, I demonstrated in a lake that you could get water lilies in an area about the size of this room in about 45 minutes work, and make from that 200 cubic meters of gas, methane gas, and that would keep me having a barbecue for a week. Why go to a store? You can just work for 45 minutes and get what you need. So that's the local possibility. And I mentioned the water wheel concept. Basically, what's going on here is that you may know that since the Three Gorges Dam in China, there are now some 80 dams being built around the world by China. And now the British want to build a giant dam in the Congo. These are all very dangerous to the ocean and to the general river economies, river ecologies as well, I should say. And I'm promoting undershot water wheels. Why? Because Marcel Duchamp has his bicycle wheel and it goes round and round, and it makes sure you have flow, okay, and don't have blockage. And the reason why, because when you have an area like a dam here, blockage in, say, Austria, it causes huge problems for the whole river. The river just becomes stagnant and more or less dead. So those are the technologies in mind, and a little bit why is that the reason why you have pretty good bioproductivity there by the Rhine and the Maas and whatever that is by Zeeland, and why you don't have so much around most of England, the British Isles, is that there's almost every river has a dam on it, and therefore the nutrients don't get to the sea. Okay, now, and then you also have problems here, say in Denmark, where nutrients in the North Sea don't get really properly, is in a proper ecosystem kind of cycle, so they get stuck somewhere between Denmark and Sweden and make microalgae blooms that are quite toxic. In fact, 2-week rainfall just reports that there was a big bloom killing fish, a bit like that, where things get stuck in the corner by, say, in the North Sea. There's not enough nutrient outtake from the water to prevent this kind of catastrophe in the water. And you can do it with something as dumb as that. And from that, make flame. I've already demonstrated that. It's pretty simple. It's not that hard. And doing that kind of catchment. Okay. And that's all the stuff that's always available. It's all around. And I think that in the post-Shell era, Holland could lead the way, because you have a lot of dams, you know, Amsterdam, Rotterdam, and so on, a lot of seafood subsidized areas, a lot of stuff accumulating, and I think Martin knows about that plastic bottle stuff too, that can be collected and not dumped down the banks, but actually taken up to make fuel, and you mean to clean out all this canal stuff that has been more or less festering now for quite some centuries. Okay, now I'm only indicating here a little bit other technologies that can be used, radar to identify bird traffic, because you want to have lots of birds. You can identify just how healthy the ecosystem is. And you have bird flyways, which is a little bit touched on in the other room, and also in the brochure. You want to organize sites, not just one stop, but also along a whole train of stops. So if you're going to do something in Afghanistan, you want to do something also in the Gulf, and then down towards Somalia, and going up to, say, Siberia, you want to have multi-site activity That means if you're doing something in Holland, you want to do something, think about also things in Spain